Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Conservation Easements 101 Fact versus Fiction, the first of a three-part webinar series between the Tug Hill Commission and the Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust. My name is Katie Malinowski, and I am the Executive Director at the Tug Hill Commission in Watertown. We're excited to be presenting this webinar series. Linda and I have been talking about it this fall and thought it'd be a good opportunity to get some word out in a new venue. And at the end of tonight's presentation, we will share information about the next two installments and how to register if you're interested. Our speakers tonight are myself and Linda Garrett, who is the Executive Director of the Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust. Linda has been the Executive Director there since 2002. She works with staff, private landowners, and partners to protect working lands in and around Tug Hill and Fort Drum, and provides outdoor and educational programs for kids and the general public throughout the region. To date, the Land Trust has protected over 20,000 acres of land and raised over $10 million for land protection. Linda began her career with the New York State Tug Hill Commission as a Natural Resources Coordinator in 1988. It is here where she helped the commission partner with local community leaders to create the Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust. Linda also spent 5 years in Fairbanks, Alaska, where she worked for the Alaska Natural History Association and the Alaska Public Lands Information Center. She also volunteered for the Interior Alaska Land Trust before returning to Northern New York and Tug Hill Tomorrow. She graduated from SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse with a BS in Resource Management, and went on to complete her MS in Outdoor Recreation Planning. A few housekeeping notes. Please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. Between Linda and myself, we're going to monitor those throughout our presentation, and we'll try to answer the questions as they come in. We also have some interactive polls for you to answer as we go through the presentation, so watch for those to pop up on your screen as well. And if you stay to the end, 2 lucky viewers will be chosen to receive a free calendar for 2021 from the Land Trust with beautiful photographs from around the region. We expect the presentation to go about 45 minutes, and we've left some time for additional questions and answers at the end. So we'll hopefully have you out of here at 8 o'clock. We are recording this presentation, and it will be available to view later on the Commission's YouTube channel as well. So with that, we will get started, and hopefully I will get this to work. Let's see. So just to start, we wanted to give you a little bit of background about the Tug Hill region. The Tug Hill region of New York covers about 2,100 square miles or 1.38 million acres between Lake Ontario and the Adirondacks. And you can see on this map, we've got Lake Ontario, Tug Hill, the Adirondack Park. We also have the Catskill Park shown on here. Tug Hill is the 3rd largest contiguous forested area in New York State, behind the Adirondacks and Catskills. The Catskills might look a little smaller boundary-wise, but the forested area is a little bit larger than Tug Hill's core forest. The region is made up of 41 towns containing 18 villages with approximately 104,000 residents, with a population density of 50 people per square mile. Towns range from, the population in towns range from a low of 78 people, and that would be in the town of Montague, here in the core, to a high of 9,450, and I believe that is the town of Hastings here just north of Syracuse. 2/3 of the region's population are concentrated in villages around the edges of the region. Rising from Lake Ontario at about 250 feet of elevation, just east of the lake near 81, the Tug Hill Plateau rises to 2,000 feet on its eastern facing escarpment, which you are seeing in that photo right there. Between the Lake Ontario's source of water and the plateau, lake effect combines, creates a lot of snow. On average, our annual snowfall is about 200 inches. It's the heaviest snowfall east of the Rockies. And this map, hopefully it'll come in, is something we've compiled from NOAA data over a couple of decades worth of time. And you can see that Tug Hill pops pretty easily here in white with that huge fetch of water over Lake Ontario, creating very deep snowfall. Oh, sorry. With that comes some of the most sustained winds in the area, hence the largest wind farm east of the Mississippi for a long time, maybe not anymore, was Maple Ridge. Despite the pride of its people, by most economic measures, it is one of the poorest regions of the Northeast. It's included in the Northern Forest region and is eligible for grants to that region because of the recognition that there is a pretty poor area. However, if you measure by natural resources, we have abundant forests, farms, recreation, and wildlands, which make it a very valuable area of the state. Hence the state recognizing the specialness of the region in the early 70s when it created the Tug Hill Commission. Tug Hills Economy is based on forestry, farming, and outdoor recreation, and is generally a working landscape. And here we have photos of logging, dairy farming. I believe that photo up there, I'm not sure which village that is. Maybe Linda knows. And then we've got, of course, snowmobiling, and that's a little bit of an old picture with $1.53 unleaded gasoline there. But certainly still a very popular activity on Tug Hill. Of course, this winter has been tough for the snowmobilers. So things we can measure about the region: approximately 73% of the region is comprised of forest land. There's approximately 400,000 acres in agricultural districts. And at last count, there's nearly 10,000 jobs in the forest and agricultural sectors. Some of the immeasurable parts of Tug Hill's natural resources that do still have a lot of value are the clean water that is generated from that precipitation on Tug Hill. It feeds the Tug Hill aquifer. It feeds many streams and rivers that originate on Tug Hill. Some of those are drinking water sources for communities like Rome and Oneida. Clean air, all those trees create a lot of carbon absorption and cycling, and even more recently, I think going to contribute quite a bit to climate change activities at the state level. Recreation, both from an economic point of view and a quality of life point of view, is very much supported by the natural resources features of Tug Hill. The snowmobiling, the skiing, the snowshoeing, that's supported by the snow, as well as ATV riding, mountain biking, hunting, fishing, trapping, all those outdoor activities that people on Tug Hill and people who visit Tug Hill really enjoy doing. A variety of wildlife habitat that supports many species of animals and birds and other wildlife. Tug Hill is an important habitat, and we've had a lot of work in the last decade or so on making sure there's a connection wildlife-wise and habitat-wise between Tug Hill and the Adirondacks. So there's a corridor for wildlife to move back and forth. And then there's just the scenic views and the open space that people value, very evident in the photographs, as you'll see in the calendar that the Land Trust puts together every year. People just really love to see Tug Hill and in all of its seasons. And then the things that are kind of intangible are having that space, that open space and forests and wetlands and streams that allow people to rest, relax, exercise. And we've really noticed that since COVID came along, that people even more so now are looking for ways to get out and decompress and find a connection with nature. Many people are from Tug Hill, or they have really strong sense of place. If they're not from here, their ancestors were, and they still really value those memories and those places that bring back stories of their ancestors, the connection to family history, and just the overall connection to a place that is very based in natural resources. And one of the last thing I will touch on is the commission has kind of tried to measure some of this in Tug Hill, and to say how much of the land on Tug Hill would you consider to be protected versus not protected. And we've done some mapping and GIS analysis to come up with these charts. So the first chart on the left shows approximately 18% of the land on Tug Hill would be considered protected in some category. And I'll talk about that in a minute in more detail. And then approximately 82% would be considered not protected. And those categories, as you'll see on the right-hand chart, include state-owned land, so state forests and state wildlife management areas, state parks, we have a few of those. It includes conservation easements that are held by New York State. There's almost 47,000 acres of those now. It includes county-owned land, as well as Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust conservation easement, which on Tug Hill is about 13,000 acres. Land that's owned by conservation organizations like the Land Trust or the Nature Conservancy or the Black River Environmental Improvement Association, which is what BRIA stands for, and then other lands that are owned by municipalities, federal government, et cetera. So just kind of an some interesting information about land ownership and on Tug Hill. And with that, I will turn it over to Linda.
Thanks, Katie. So that was a good background about what the Tug Hill region is like. And Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust primary focus is the Tug Hill region. We're a private not-for-profit organization. We were founded in 1990 by a group of local citizens and then incorporated officially in 1991. So if you do the math, we are actually celebrating our 30th year this year. So we're pretty excited about that. And we do serve parts of Jefferson, Lewis, Oswego, and Oneida counties, but we also work in the surrounding area as well, as you'll see in a map that's coming up. So our mission is to protect the wildlands, working forests, and farms of the Tug Hill region and surrounding areas, and to promote the appreciation of the region's natural and cultural heritage for present and future generations. We're a little bit different than a lot of land trusts in that we do have an educational and kind of cultural heritage function. Some of you probably have participated or come to our Venerable Folks art exhibit, and we've done a couple of like family farms exhibits and different things to kind of showcase the culture and diversity of farming and people on Tug Hill. And there's a lot more of that to come. Next slide. So a little bit about the Land Trust background for some people who might not know this. There are over 90 land trusts in New York State. So, and just in Jefferson County, there's, I think, 4. And over 1,700 nationally. So we're not unique in that way. There's a lot of land trusts that work throughout the country, kind of doing the same things, but just have a unique niche on where they're protecting. It's usually a place-based kind of thing. But there are some national organizations like the Nature Conservancy that work throughout the country and internationally, actually. Like most not-for-profits, our funding comes from individual donations, and we do write a lot of grants and do special events. We actually have 6 staff people now, 3 full-time and 3 part-time, and we work out of the zoo up in Watertown, although with COVID, we've been doing a lot of remote work. To date, we've protected over 20,000 acres of conservation easements, and that's really the main tool that we use to protect land. Although we do now own 2 fee-owned properties, that we own those actually outright. One in the town of Rutland, which is the Joseph Lake Wildlife Sanctuary, and we just acquired, or donated, a piece of land in the town of Lorraine, which we are going to be calling the French Settlement Road Public Conservation Area, and we're hoping to be able to improve the access to that property so that we can have trails and a parking area and do programs out there. So we're pretty excited about that. Next slide. So this is the map of Katie, I don't know that if they can see, can't see my pointer, can you? No. This is a map of the Tug Hill region. The brown is the actual legislatively designated boundary. And all of the really dark blue or brown, I don't guess it's brown, parcels are lands that the land trust has protected. And you can kind of see that they're sort of in clumps. And a lot of land protected along the edge of Fort Drum. We're working with the Army to protect a buffer along Fort Drum. So we're, as you can see, we're doing pretty well in creating a buffer so they can continue to train and not have a lot of what they call encroachment. So that's really helped our land protection program, and especially helped us with working with farmers, because a lot of that land outside of Fort Drum is farmland. Next slide. So I'm going to go through just what I call facts versus fiction, because I've learned in my many years of working for the Land Trust that people who aren't familiar with what we do have a preconceived notion about what a conservation easement is and what it isn't and what it can do. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what a conservation easement does. So I always like to take an opportunity to kind of go through and say what is true and what isn't true. So we're going to do that for a little bit. And I think this is when some of our interactive part comes in. So you can, the first question is public access required on a conservation easement property? You guys can take a few seconds. We'll see how that, it says that hosts and panelists can't vote. Are you getting votes, Katie? Okay, I can't see it.
Yep, we're getting votes. I'll give another 15 seconds or so. So far, the group looks like they're leaning towards no's. We've got 14 no's and 2 yeses, and we will end the poll and I will share that. Can you see that now?
Oh, yep, I can see that now. Okay, great. All right, so you want to go to the next slide? So the answer is that public access is not required on conservation easement properties, and especially on our donated conservation easements. So when we work with, when we do conservation easements, we usually, can you take that poll down?
Oh, I thought it was gone.
It's on my screen, I'm sorry.
I think you can close out, yep.
Oh, I can close it? Oh, okay.
You can close it because, yep.
Got it. All right, so when we work with, when we do conservation easements, sometimes we are able to purchase the conservation easements, like in the Fort Drum ACUB program, they provide funds for us to actually purchase those development rights on that property. But most of the time, landowners just donate those conservation easements. If the land, if it's a donated conservation easement, public access is not required. And we actually prefer it that way because we'll be talking about this a little bit more later on, but the land trust has to monitor that, and we can't make people not go on your property. So so we leave public access up to the landowner to do. There are a few instances, this is the Wymans, and I think they're on tonight, hi Barb and Al, where we have gotten a grant, like this one was in particular was from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they required us to have public access. So we have a limited, one trail that goes from the road to the East Branch of Fish Creek that is the public access that satisfied that grant requirement. But in most cases, we have working farms that, you know, we don't want people traipsing over, and the farmers don't want people traipsing over. So not required at all in a conservation easement. Next one. So the second question that we have is, who decides what is allowed in the conservation easement agreement? And I'm going to put the poll up. So is it the landowner, the land trust, or both? Katie, we'll give you a couple of seconds to answer that, and then I guess close it out when you think it's
Yep.
good.
So Looks like just about everybody has voted, so I'm going to end the polling and share the results.
Okay, so landowner, oh, nobody thinks the land trust decides what's allowed in the conservation easement, and both. So, okay, Katie, you can go to the next one. So the actual fact is that the landowner and the land trust work together. So we work very closely with the landowner to determine, to understand what their vision of the property is and what resources there are that we should be protecting. And then the way that we construct the conservation easement, it restricts how much development happens and where the development happens, so that those natural resources are protected and so that the vision of the property owner is kind of guaranteed. So the neat thing about a conservation easement is that they are individually tailored. So not any two easements are really alike. Some landowners decide they want to set aside, a little chunk of 5 acres or whatever because they've got a child that they think might someday want to build a house there, or they might want to sell it at some point in case they need to get some cash for whatever they might need. But we do work together to make sure that the landowner is comfortable, and we try and have family be involved in conversations as well, so that there are no surprises for anyone. So next slide. So our third question is, does the conservation easement take the land off the tax rolls? It's a yes or no question. Take a few seconds to answer that one. All right, you guys are on it tonight. So looks like a lot of people said no, and one person said yes. Katie. So the next, so the answer is that the landowner continues to pay the property taxes. So it does not take the land off the tax rolls. I know I've had conversations with a lot of local officials that thought maybe that conservation easements with the land trust did take the land off the tax rolls. The landowner continues to pay the property taxes. They are eligible for annual state and income tax credits, based on the property taxes that they pay. So if you have a donated conservation easement, every year we send you forms and a filing number that is with the easements are filed with the State Department of Environmental Conservation, and you can claim 25% of your property tax value on your state income taxes, and it's a refundable credit. So if you do not owe any income taxes, you'll just get a check for that 25%, and that's every year, and that goes to any successive landowner. So it doesn't have to be the original landowner who granted the conservation easement to get that income tax credit. It's whoever owns that eased property can claim that credit. And for state held conservation easements in Tug Hill, there is special legislation that does require the state to pay their share of the property taxes if they're holding a conservation easement on the property. So in those cases, the person who owns the property would be paying their part of the taxes, and then the state would be paying a proportion of that, depending on what the value of the conservation easement is, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. Next slide. Okay, so the next question is, does the land under a conservation easement have to stay in a forever wild condition? Again, this is a yes or no question. Okay, and so couple of people think, yes, it has to stay in a forever wild condition, and a couple people say no. So, Katie, next slide. So the fact is that there's lots of variation on what can be done with a property that has a conservation easement on it. Like I said previously, we're really looking at what the goals of the landowner are and what natural resource values we're trying to protect on the property. So not all two properties are alike. And we have a lot right now. We're acquiring more and more easements that are working forests and working farms. And so those easements obviously are not forever wild. They're working lands easements. We do have some landowners who their vision, their goal for their property is to leave it as is. They don't want it. They want nature to take its course. They want to keep it that way. So we, respect what their goals are. We do talk to landowners about thinking about the future and that maybe leaving some a window open to allow for forest management in the future. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it, but you never know what's going to happen in the future, and these easements are forever. And so we try and get landowners to think about different scenarios that might happen and what they would like to see if that was the case. So usually these take a long time to complete, years. Some of them, some we've worked on for 15 or 20 years. The landowner thought they wanted to do it, then they decided, well, maybe it's not the right time for me to do it now. And then as they're getting older, they're thinking, oh, maybe I really do want to do this. And so it's really a long negotiation process. Sometimes it's pretty quick. And not every single property that we see is suitable for a conservation easement. So we evaluate it. We have to make sure that we have to follow some rules about conservation. Is there conservation value? And there are IRS regulations about what constitutes conservation values. And so we have to make sure that it does have some public benefit because there are tax benefits to this, to these conservation easements. To date, we've completed over 20,000 acres of conservation easements, and we probably have over 5,000 acres right now that are in the works. We've got a lot of interest in this, especially with some of the programs where we can actually purchase easements, which we will talk about in the next two webinars that we're doing. We'll be talking more about those programs. Katie. So the next question is, why do landowners choose to do a conservation easement? And so do they do it because they are going to get money for it? Do they do it for the love of the land? Do they do it for peace of mind, to benefit the community, or is it all of the above? All of the above, for the love of the land, yeah. So, Katie. So we really do have a variety of reasons. And so I'm going to go through some of the reasons why people choose to put a conservation easement on their property. For the love of the land is probably right up there, but usually there's a lot of different reasons combined that help people make the decision to actually do a conservation easement. I've been working, as Katie said, I helped start the land trust back in 1991 and then left and came back in 2002. So I've been working for a really long time, and probably my favorite part of my job is working with landowners because the connection that they have with the land and the love that they have for the land that they've owned, and a lot of them have owned it for generations and generations. It's just really, it's very humbling, and it's very moving, and it's a very deep connection that they have, that they want to see this land kind of stay the way it is And they're really thankful that the Land Trust is around to help them realize that vision. Katie? Protecting Tycho Hills working land. So we work with a lot of farmers, like I said, and we work with a lot of forest landowners who love their land just as much as the person who wants to keep it forever wild. And they understand their land and they have a really deep connection with it. And, you know, Tug Hill is really, as we had talked earlier, with the number of people that are employed with either in the forest industry or the agricultural industry, it's really a big part of our economy here in the North Country. So if we can protect that land base and allow those kinds of activities to be able to continue, that's pretty important for our region. And peace of mind, I think this is a great reason that I see a lot of landowners when they come to us. They really, you know, they want to make sure that, you know, they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into this land their whole life, or a big part of their life usually. And they really want the peace of mind of knowing that when they're gone, that land is still going to be the way it is, or pretty close to the way it is. And the Land Trust is going to ensure that their wishes are being honored. It also can leave a lasting legacy and have a lot of community benefits. And the greatest example of this is our first easement project that we did back in the early 90s with Dr. Sheldon Judson, who got a group of landowners together. They had informally had this conglomerate of land of different landowners and town land, and the people had for just kind of informally had these trails and they used it. And you know, Dr. Judson had this vision of, it was a really unique area. There were some really cool sand plains, and he brought all of those landowners and the town together. And now the Trenton Greenbelt Trail system, which is still there and being used today for education, for recreation, it's really a jewel for the town, and something that they are really happy to have, and that they promote, you know, as an asset to their town. As I said before, I mean, some people do it because of the tax benefits, and that's probably kind of the icing on the cake for some people. There are income tax deductions that can be taken. So these are for donated conservation easements. There's a federal income tax deduction, and that is only for the original landowner who donates the conservation easement. And it's determined by doing an appraisal and looking at what the value of the property is without if you sold it on the market today, what you would get for it without a conservation easement on it. And then the appraiser, not all appraisers can do these kinds of appraisals, but then the appraiser looks at what the value of the land is with the conservation, with the restrictions on it. And the difference is like writing a check to a charity. People can take that as an income tax deduction. And over the years, the Land Trust community has lobbied the federal government to expand how landowners can take advantage of those deductions, because in the beginning they had like a 5-year period that they could take them. And what we were finding was most landowners were land rich and cash poor, and so they weren't able to take advantage of all of that income tax deduction. So that's now been expanded out, and it can be taken over a 16-year period. So you can keep rolling it over until hopefully you could use all of that income tax deduction. And it's depending on if you're a farmer or if you're a regular landowner, there's a certain percentage of your income tax of your adjusted gross income that you can take as a part of the deduction. So it's like 50% of your adjusted gross income. And then if you're a farmer, I think it's 100%. So it depends on your situation. But we have fact sheets about all of these that we'd be happy to give you and explain to you in more detail. And then I did talk a little bit about the New York State income tax credit. And that is for anybody who owns an eased property, they can take an income tax credit if they donated it or it was a bargain sale. And then it can lower your estate taxes, although I think with the way our estate tax system is right now, there's not much advantage in the estate tax realm. Next one. So saving the special places. So we have a plan, and we've identified what we think are the special places on Tug Hill. And so those are kind of our priority areas. River corridors and farmlands, prime farmland, and the sand plains. This is actually the Trenton Greenbelt. So there's a lot of special places on Tug Hill that we feel really deserve to be protected. It's part of what makes Tug Hill. And so protecting those places is really important for us. Next slide. And then there's always, making sure that we have clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, and open spaces for us to enjoy. And like Katie said, that's becoming more and more evident, and so is the clean water and clean air. With people who have come to Tug Hill from other places where there's been a lot of development and impacts on those resources, they really see what can happen if everything gets really developed. So being able to protect our water and our clean air having a lot of trees and open spaces really helps filter the air. So that's really, I think, important. And with climate change as well, to mitigate that a little bit. Katie? And then, for our future generations. So we want to leave something for our kids to have and to value and to cherish. And so that's why we do a lot of work with kids, because we're hoping to help them make connections with the land so that they care about what happens, because they're going to be the people who support conservation in the future and, love nature and want to see it continue. So if they don't care anymore, that's kind of going to be the end of our work, because we're not going to have anyone to support what we do. So I think it's really important. Okay, Katie. And I talked a little bit about this, but once the conservation easement is in place, and these conservation easements are forever. So we've all agreed on it, and we've had our attorneys look at it, and we sign on the dotted line. That's just really the beginning of the land trust work. And it's really important for us to work with the landowners so that they're happy with the result of the conservation easement and what it says can and cannot happen, and talking with the families as well, because the land trust job just starts once the easement is put in place. And so we file it with the county clerk's office. It becomes part of the chain of title with the property, and we have to monitor that property at least once each year. So I know there are some landowners on our webinar tonight, and they know every year we contact them, and we love to visit with them. I think, they're actually, a lot of them are part of our family. They know me, they know my children. We've known each other for so many years because we visit with them at least once a year, walk the property with them if we encourage them to come and walk with us. This year has been a little bit different with COVID, but normally we ask them to come and walk with us and, talk with us about what their plans are and what they want to do with the property, to make sure that there's not going to be anything that they're thinking about doing that might not be what the conservation easement said could happen. So really, if we do discover something that is not allowed in the conservation easement, was not part of the agreement, then it's the land trust job to enforce the terms of the easement, which we try to resolve in an amicable way and try and work together with them to fix whatever has happened. But there are cases where, you know, we'd have to take somebody to court to make them, you know, if they built a structure that is in a place that it wasn't supposed to be, and they wouldn't take it down, we would have to take them to court to make them take it down. Because if we didn't enforce the terms of the easement, we could lose our 501c3, we could lose our non-for-profit status because we're not doing our job. And that's part of our job, is to enforce the easement. So we take it very seriously. You want to go to the next slide, Katie? So just a summary of what a conservation easement is, and this is just kind of a 30,000 foot look at what a conservation easement is. But it's voluntary. No one's making anyone do this. It is a legal agreement, so we're always encouraging our landowners to make sure that they have an attorney, their attorney, look at it. We have an attorney that looks at things on our behalf, but we want our landowners to understand it. And because it's a legal agreement, there are a lot of legal terms in there. And so sometimes they're hard to understand. So having your attorney look it over to make sure that you understand what you're signing, because it's forever. And they're really hard to change once they're put in place. So it's a voluntary legal agreement between the landowner and the land trust. It limits the type and the amount of development that can happen. And like I said, they are forever. They can be amended, but usually they're only able to be amended if you're going to make them more restrictive. You cannot make it less restrictive. You can't change your mind, which is another reason why it takes a while to get these right for the landowner, because you never know what the future is going to be. Some of our agricultural easements are really flexible because we don't, it doesn't say it has to be a certain type of agriculture, but the land is available for agriculture, and what kind of agriculture is going to be in the future, we don't know. So it allows for any kind of agriculture that could be in the future. Like I said, it is filed with the deed, and successive owners are bound by the terms. So it goes with the chain of title. So when someone is going to purchase the property and you do a title search, it'll come up that there's an easement on the property. So there should not be any surprises with the new owners. And we really like to get to meet the new owners as soon as possible, so we can just introduce ourselves and let them know and understand what they're getting into. Again, public access is not required, and the landowner does continue to pay the property taxes. I know we have had questions. We can just go back real quick for the property tax thing. We've had people say, do our property taxes get reduced? A majority of the easements that we do are on working farms and working forests, and they're usually assessed as working farms and working forests. So we're not really changing the land use. And so therefore, usually the assessor does not change the assessment. We have had some landowners who have gone to the assessor and grieved their assessment after the easement's been on, and been able to get a reduction, but we don't usually see that very often. Okay, sorry, next slide. So like that's our 40, we're almost right on time. This is awesome. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. As Katie mentioned, and I think I did too, we have 2 more webinars in this series coming up. One is on farmland conservation, and we're pretty excited about that. There's it'll be specifically for farmland conservation, and we will be talking with, we will also, besides having somebody from Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust speak, we are also going to have somebody from the American Farmland Trust and from the New York State Department of Ag and Markets talk about some of the funding programs that they have for both municipalities and for landowners. And American Farmland Trust is going to talk a little bit about why farmland protection is important and what's happening, what they're seeing happen in New York State with farmland. And then we're still kind of working on the forest conservation one, but again, there's some state funding that's coming down the chain that might help with being able to purchase a forest conservation easement. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that, and also about some other forest conservation options and talking about how the importance, again, for a town to think about why they would want to protect forests in their town. So,
Linda, you have a question. The first question is, oh, it just went away. How much does it cost to create a conservation easement?
so there are kind of two costs to the conservation easement. So there's the cost that the land trust has for staff to do all of the work that needs to be done to get the easement drafted. One of the things that we do is that we have to do, I talked about going back and monitoring every year. Well, one of the things that we create is called the baseline documentation report. And that's kind of a snapshot in time of the property. It's maps and pictures and verbal descriptions of what is actually there. And both the landowner and the land trust sign off on that and say, yep, this is an accurate depiction of what's here right now. And we talk about, size of buildings and all those kinds of things. So we know exactly what's there. And then that's what we use to monitor. So when we go back out and there's a building that's where it's not supposed to be and it wasn't there because we have proof from this baseline documentation report, that's how we can defend those easements. So it usually, on average, costs the land trust about $5,000 to do all of that work, to do the baseline documentation, to do the easement negotiations with the landowner, to pay the attorney costs, to do all of the title work that needs to be done. And a lot of times we're able to get grants to help cover those costs. We ask landowners if they can help with that, but we don't want it to be a deal breaker because we understand that there's some people that just can't afford it. And there are some people that can afford it. And we can also do like payment options where you can just pay a little bit at a time if that works better for you. But we really do try and get grants and things to cover those we call them transaction costs. The second part is a stewardship fund contribution. So we have a fund, a pooled fund that we use to help cover our costs for our annual monitoring and also to be there in case there's a violation, because it won't take very long before, if we had a violation and had to go to court, that gets really expensive really fast. We do actually have insurance for that, conservation easement insurance, if you want. That helps us, and we have a deductible, but that's not a guaranteed thing. There's a panel that reviews any violations, and they decide if they're going to help, if they're going to allow the conservation easement defense insurance to kick in and pay for that, and we have deductibles. So that being said, we ask the landowners to help with that as well, because that's the real big expense. So we need to have enough money in that stewardship fund so that every year we can go out and this is forever. So we have it invested and it's building, and we try not to touch the principal of it and just use the interest to pay some of our monitoring costs, and we don't even cover all of our costs from that fund. And a lot of times landowners, I talked about how no two conservation easements are exactly alike. Well, another thing that the land trust has to do is every time one of those landowners decides that they set aside the 5 acres and now they want to build there, the land trust has to make sure that where they're building is right, and we have to go out and check and make sure that they're doing it, where they said they were going to do it. In the conservation easement agreement, we have to have attorneys review it and say, yeah, it's okay. So that takes a lot of time. Or even if they're managing their forest and they decide that they're going to do a timber harvest, we require them to have a forest management plan and work with a forester, but we also go out and make sure that the timber is being harvested in accordance with the forest management plan, so that, because we're stewards of these easements and we have to make sure that, what it says in the easement is being done. And again, the reason why we have to do that is because we could lose our not-for-profit status if we don't. If we don't enforce those easements, we could lose we could be we could get the IRS and the state attorney general could say, you're not doing your job anymore. You can't be a land trust anymore. So we take it very seriously. And every 5 years, you might have noticed the little accreditation seal that we have on things. We go through a very rigorous review of all of our conservation, not all of our conservation easements. They usually pick 5 that they really dissect and make sure that we're doing things the way that we're supposed to be doing them, monitoring them every year, doing the reports, making sure that we're doing all of our due diligence. And if we don't do that, we could lose our accreditation. And again, we could not be a land trust anymore. That stewardship fund donation that we ask from a landowner, we figured out that if we got, for every easement that we did, now I'm not saying that this is what we ask from every landowner. This is what our cost is. We're on average, it's $17,000 per easement that we need to have in the stewardship fund, so that we can generate enough money so that we can monitor and steward those easements into the future. Again, we understand that some landowners can't do that, and so we have managed to grow our stewardship fund so that the board, our land trust board, if it's a property that we really want and the landowner really can't afford it, we have a little slush fund in there that we can help pay some of that stewardship funding. We also have been able to work with other organizations that feel it's really important to protect these lands, and donors that feel it's really important to protect these lands, that help contribute to the stewardship fund for us. So we work with the landowners on that. It is a lot of money, I understand that, and the Accreditation Commission actually requires us to have a minimum of $5,000 per easement in our stewardship fund. And we meet that and exceed that by quite a bit as a minimum. But we take it seriously. And when you think about all the work that we have to do and how, it's expensive, and then we're in a big region, and we're constantly out checking on easements, and that's our job. That's what we're doing. But that's how we do it from the stewardship fund. So it can, I see there, it says, is that a one-time donation or an annual donation? And so, Michael, it depends on how the land, what the landowner can do. If they feel that they can, make a $5,000 contribution to the land trust stewardship fund, that's a one-time donation, and you don't have to make any more donations after that. If if you decide we have a couple of landowners that are giving us $100 a month until they get to that $5,000. So we're willing to work with the landowners to, make it happen and do what they can. But, I think people say to us, well, we're giving you, we're giving you this land, we're giving you this conservation easement. And actually what you're giving us is a burden. You're giving us the obligation to make sure that the terms of that easement are enforced forever. And that, it's not like when we accept a conservation easement that we are getting any monetary value from that. So I know there is a mindset out there that people feel like, well, I'm giving up, all of my development value. Well, there's tax benefits that you get from that, but the land trust doesn't get anything from that except for, that's what our job is. That's what we're here to do, and we love doing it, and we're happy that we're doing it. But it is, it is a burden, and it costs money to make sure that those easements are forever stewarded in the way that the original landowner intended.
So Linda, we have about 5 minutes. We have one more question. It's a little bit specific, but maybe you can answer it in a little more general fashion. Right. So the question is, if we had 100 acres that we wanted to put in the land trust, in an easement, I'm assuming.
Mhm.
Can we create a floating area to add an additional 5-acre parcel for a house down the road? Maybe
Yeah,
you just talk.
yeah, so we used to, a lot of times, landowners would say, well, I know that I know that my child or my heirs would want to build a house on this property sometime in the future, but they're not really sure where they want it to be. And we would say, okay, back when we were first doing easements, oh, we'll just do this floating building envelope, 5 acres. We'll decide in the future, if ever you want to exercise that right, then we'll decide where that's going to go. And that was fine, except that the IRS decided that they didn't like that. And so if you want to take a tax deduction for that conservation easement, then you cannot have a floating area. You have to have a set area that, so say you have 100 acres and you could say maybe in this 20-acre area, at some point in the future, we're gonna decide that there's 5 acres that we want that we're gonna put a house on down the road. So you can't just say anywhere on the 100 acres, but you could say that in this 20 acres, and that's been looked at more favorably. So that, and
Okay.
it really depends. And we have to think about, what the zoning regulations are and all those other things too. So we don't want to create situations where we're saying that this is where the parcel needs to be, and then down the road, the zoning changes and it doesn't conform with what's allowed. So there's those considerations as well.
Great, thank you. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I think we're gonna wrap it up for the night, and everyone's been waiting to find out who is gonna win a free calendar. So I'm gonna announce that, or is that good? Okay, Linda, for me
Yeah,
to announce?
definitely. And so, yeah, and if it's somebody that we have in our database, we can just mail it out. And if not, maybe they can just email or.
Yeah, we'll follow up with an email. We have everyone's email from the registration. So the first winner of a calendar is Janine McCanny. I know I saw her on earlier. So Janine, we will be getting you a calendar out. And then our second calendar winner is John Treadwell. And I think I saw him earlier on too. So congratulations. You'll have a very nice calendar in the mail here shortly. And Janine's still on. She says thank you. So thank you again for everyone for joining us tonight. It was a very nice showing. And like I said, we will have this video recorded and on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and we will send an email out to all of you with a link to that. So if there's something you wanted to go back and look at again, or share it with anyone else, you can do that.
Great. Yes. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me. We do have a fact sheet, kind of a FAQ about conservation easements that we send out. So.
And there's Linda's contact information. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a good night and stay safe. And hopefully we'll see you next month for farmland.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.